If at any point you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat, or you can use the raise hand function, and I'm sure that Deana Thomas or myself will be able to call upon you to unmute and ask your question. So again, thank you and welcome to our Kentucky Archives Month presentation with the Kentucky Historical Society. Deana Thomas, an archivist from the Kentucky Historical Society, is going to be presenting today on the institution and of some collections, I believe. And we are so excited and thankful to have her presenting. Deana, do you want me to pull up the PowerPoint, or do you want to share that when you're ready?
I'll share it now.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. And again, any questions at all, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I will turn it over to you, Deana.
Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And I apologize. I am not an advanced PowerPoint person, but hopefully it all makes sense and works out. I just also want to say first, thank you all for thank you to KDLA for allowing KHS to present about what we have, what kind of collections we have, what we do, that kind of thing. And then, I'm just going to jump right in. So the Kentucky Historical Society is located here in Frankfort, Kentucky, not too far away from the Kentucky Department for Library and Archives, of course. And I'm the archivist, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our archival collection. So just as an overview, archival collection here at KHS is primarily manuscript, photographs, small collections, flat files, rare books, pamphlets, and maps. We have approximately 4,000 cubic feet worth of material that breaks down into those 7 types of collections. Yes. And so when you come to KHS, or when you want to use some archival material at KHS, there are 2 main ways to do that. One is through our library catalog online and our digital catalog online. And that's where you can find the types of archival material that we have here at KHS. And when you come on site, the way you access our collection is through our research library, which is open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 to 5. And admission for the library is included with admission for our campus. And if you're a member of KHS, it's free to use the library. And I just realized I can't tell if there are any comments. So Catherine, if you could let me know, that would be great. Sorry.
Will do.
Okay, so the first collection I want to highlight is our 2019 Kentucky General Assembly tweet collection. We have called this, the collection number is the DIG3, which you see in parentheses. This is a collection that was created, for lack of a better word, was created by us in 2019. The 2019 Kentucky General Assembly was particularly interesting, important. There was a lot of legislation that was going in front of the General Assembly at that time, in particular related to the Kentucky pension system. And so as a result of that, I had found a Google app called Tweet Archiver that would allow us to collect tweets that were tweeted publicly. So if it was from a private account, we don't have those tweets. But it would allow us to collect in relation to the General Assembly using a hashtag. So for the 2019 Kentucky General Assembly collection, I used the hashtag KYGA19. That was a hashtag used by a lot of officials, a lot of the general public who was tweeting about things related to the General Assembly. So I felt like that was a good way for us to be able to catch a lot of the discussion and a lot of the tweets that were tweeted out. As you can see in the screen, there are I chose the top 4 tweets that were in that collection to show you all. And when I say the top 4, I don't mean the top 4 as in they're the top most important tweets, or they're just the first 4 that showed up in the spreadsheet. But as you can see, there's a couple different discussions that are happening on it. And the idea for this collection is that, social media is a huge way in which the general public discusses everyday life, but also more specific topics like the business of their state's legislature. So instead of getting that information in something like a newspaper, social media allows us to get more individualized responses to a variety of topics, a variety of situations. So we have the 2019 Kentucky General Assembly tweet collection, but we also have a tweet collection in relation to the 2019 Lincoln Memorial confrontation, as well as the Marshall County High School shooting that occurred in 2019, I believe, and the as well as tweet collections related to Breonna Taylor and the social unrest that occurred last summer. I'm trying to think of some other bigger events, moments that were Kentucky related that we collected some tweets for. But the reason I wanted to highlight this collection is because this is something that archives have to deal with in the digital age. It's trying to get digital material to reflect what the public is talking about in relation to our state. And so this is one of those collections. Any questions or thoughts on this collection?
Yeah, this is Catherine. I actually, how fascinating. So do you use this and only track by hashtag, or at this point, have you just decided to track by Twitter account?
So the program that we use for the tweets we've collected thus far, it only really allows us to search or to collect tweets by by keyword. So I chose to do a very specific hashtag, because if keeping it open, you get a lot of tweets that aren't at all related to what you're trying to capture. I don't know if that makes sense, but it thus far, collecting the tweets by hashtag, it has been the most successful at allowing us to collect both the tweets we really want to collect and the tweets we really don't want to collect, without it being too overwhelming amount of tweets being collected, if that makes sense.
Would this also include any threads where the initial tweet might have the hashtag, but then the following tweets in the thread might not have the hashtag?
Let me see. So it does seem to, I can't set it up to not include retweets or comments. I've chosen to collect the retweets and comments. So basically it will if the hashtag is used in the response to a tweet, it'll capture both those tweets. So for example, the second entry, the KY Sandy, Sandra F. Woodward, she has retweeted, or this person has retweeted the KY Dems grassroots tweet, which they didn't use KYGA19, but in her response, she did. And so we got both of those tweets.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's still the spreadsheet in its unedited version. This is an edited version, but I've only edited for to make sure that all the information fits onto one screen. And so the unedited version, which is available upon request, you will notice that there are a lot of the same tweets. The same tweet has been retweeted a lot of times, and you get that retweet, but you also get the comment that the person is saying. It's kind of difficult to get threads. It's hard to see the thread of a conversation, but you get it all in there. It just is going to require you to really parse out the thread that it was tweeted as a part of, if that makes sense at all.
It does, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? I will say that there was a bit of a concern that we might be putting information, people who aren't expecting their tweets to be saved might have some issue with their name, their screen name, and whatever they tweeted being made public. But these are all publicly available tweets, so there's no real privacy issue there. And we have decided to not take any tweet out of the collection. You know, if somebody saw something they tweeted and they weren't happy with their tweet being made public, we have decided that it is, since they are public tweets, it's in the best interest of the public to keep it in the collection. We will make, yeah, that's just a concern that some people have. It's something we've taken into consideration, but thus far it hasn't really been that much of an issue, but I do foresee it becoming more of an issue in the future as more and more tweets are collected, or social media posts are collected. You know, sometimes people tweet things, post things on Facebook that then they regret later. Maybe we will have caught one of those tweets. But that's just like everything. It's maybe unfortunate that that moment got captured, but sorry. I see another question. The question is, are the tweets captured being stored on a hosting platform? We use Archivist for our tweets captured. No, right now, the way that we capture the tweets, the Google app that we use, we set up a search and it collates all the tweets that match that search into a Google spreadsheet. And then we download that spreadsheet, or that rather I download that spreadsheet into an Excel spreadsheet. And that Excel spreadsheet lives on our servers. Right now, that's kind of our best preservation methods, or modus operandi, if you will. But in the future, we are looking at using other platforms, other software to capture tweets, both the public tweets, or both the public social media posts, but also our own social media posts. We're hoping for something like Preservica that would allow us to record, capture the things that we tweet and things that we post on our social media. Right now, we only have the ability to capture tweets. We don't have I haven't been able to figure out anyway, a way for us to capture Facebook posts or even Instagram. So it's still in the early stages. Okay. So another collection I thought I'd highlight is our Howe-Salyers collection. It's a collection of 69 scrapbooks, and they were donated by two people, Fran and Dave Salyers, in 2018. Now, I had a really great volunteer who worked. It probably took close to 2 years, but not quite 2 years. But he was able to digitize every single page of every single scrapbook. So all of the scrapbooks right now are in our digital collection. And an example of one of the scrapbook pages is on the right side of the screen. So anyway, the scrapbooks were primarily made by one person, a woman named Sarah Eva Howe-Salyers, and she primarily made the scrapbooks for her family, both herself, but also her children. And the scrapbooks really, they both document the family's experience in and around Kentucky, but also just what life, say, at like the University of Kentucky was in the 1930s. 3 of the 4 kids related to the scrapbooks went to UK. And so there are several scrapbooks that have memorabilia or just ephemeral material that would show what it would be like, what it would have been like rather, to go to UK in the 1930s. Then one of the things I really love about this collection is that the Scrapbooks creator, there are two different types of scrapbooks in the collection. There's a collection of scrapbooks that are just kind of documenting the person's lives, the people involved's lives. But then there's also a group of scrapbooks in which the creator is passing down history as she sees it to the next generation. And the image on the right, it is an example from my favorite scrapbook, which is Scrapbook 41. And in Scrapbook 41, Sarah Eva Howe-Salyers, she lays out her history of the world for her grandson, who was just about to be born. She created a scrapbook for him, in memory of his birth, kind of thing. Anyway, in the scrapbook, as you can see on the page here, it says the story of the Indians in our country is very sad. I think it's not many people took the kind way with them that William Penn did, but made enemies of them. So the soldiers had to fight them many times like this. The reason I think this is interesting is because while she notes the confrontation, the tension, the violence, the bad treatment of Native Americans throughout, America's history. But then when she gets to the Civil War era, she doesn't make any mention really of the Civil War occurring at all. So she's been very selective about what she chooses to include in the history of the world to her son, or to her grandson rather, and what she chooses to leave out. And the reason I liked it is because it's a great way of showing how people pass down history from one generation to the next. So yeah, that's the collection. It also includes a lot of newspaper clippings, particularly from the 1930s, 1930s and 40s, which is particularly of interest because it does include a lot of World War II related conversation or clippings from the lead up to World War II, which is an interesting to see how somebody who doesn't know what's about to happen, to see how they were viewing it as it was happening. Again, kind of significant from that section of scrapbooks. There's no mention of the Holocaust. There's no mention of the oppression of Jews or the deportation of Jews, killing of Jews. It's not mentioned at all. It might give the impression that, Americans couldn't have known about what was going on. I think that that's a bit misleading, but nonetheless, it's interesting to see what was included and what wasn't. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about this collection?
Do you receive many scrapbooks like this? Do you have a lot of scrapbooks in KHS?
We have, certainly we have not gotten many scrapbooks like this collection. I mean, 69 scrapbooks is a lot of scrapbooks. It's very unlikely that we would take another collection, to be quite honest, that has 69 scrapbooks. It's a lot of work to make them accessible and to preserve them. But that said, we do have a decent amount of scrapbooks in the collection. Typically, they are not family scrapbook, or how to say, they are, they are scrapbooks created after the fact, not while things are actually happening. So they're a little bit different. And then there are also quite a few of organizational related scrapbooks. So a sorority, a women's club, a veterans group, those kind of scrapbooks. We do have quite a few of those. Also, a number of scrapbooks related to the 1937 flood. That seems to be a big event that was a decent amount of people made quite a few scrapbooks about that, which is quite interesting, actually. Okay, no other questions. I'll go on to the next. Oh, yeah, so I also love that somebody made a comment about how they love how Fran and David rescued the scrapbooks from the trash. The two donors of the scrapbook, they had, I can't recall exactly when it was, but they basically noticed that one of Dave's cousins had thrown a bunch of the scrapbooks into the trash when they were clearing out a family member's house. And, you know, Fran, knowing how valuable the scrapbooks were in a historical sense, went into the trash dumpster and grabbed a bunch of the scrapbooks and, you know, of course, asked the cousin to make sure that it was okay for her to take the scrapbooks and then give them to us. But yeah, it's one of those times where it's really important to have people out in the public who also understand the importance of this type of primary source material. Because without somebody like that to save it from being thrown away, it would have never gotten to KHS and thus never to the rest of the public. So very, very cool story. And I should also say that Fran has a blog of her own where she uses the scrapbooks to talk about the family history related to the Salyers. And if anybody's interested in that, I will put the URL to her blogs in the chat feature in just a second. Yep, very reminiscent of Dr. Clark's work as well. Okay. Okay. So the next collection I'd like to highlight is our North Frankfort Redevelopment Appraisals collection. It's got a kind of interesting name, but it's basically a collection of the of houses and buildings that were a part of the Crawfish Bottom neighborhood before it was torn down in the 1950s, 60s, 70s in order to build the Capitol Plaza area. And so the collection itself consists of an appraisal report, which you can see on the left side of the screen, and then a photograph that accompanies that appraisal report. One of the reasons I really like this collection is because, especially in Frankfort, the Craw neighborhood is known for being a certain way. Something it was a really, really great neighborhood, something it was really, really bad neighborhood. And ultimately, I think it's like every neighborhood, it's different for the different people. It's a different kind of neighborhood depending on your experiences in that neighborhood. You know, some were good and some were bad. But I also think Frankfort doesn't have a lot of urban renewal efforts, and the Crawfish Bottom is one of those urban renewal efforts that we can look at to see how the urban renewal movement affected Frankfort. And in this case, it's Crawfish Bottom neighborhood or Crawfish Bottom houses and whatnot. One of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation is how this collection has been used in educational programming that we've done. The one thing I would want to highlight just right now is the information that the appraisal report gives us. Oops, sorry. And then the picture it shows us. In this particular house, I mean, I think from the front, you can't see too much about the house, but it looks in fairly good shape on the outside. So structurally seems pretty well preserved. And as you notice at the remarks at the bottom of the appraisal page, it says good lot, good condition, semi-commercial, old house, but well preserved. One of the arguments for urban renewal and getting rid of the Crawfish Bottom neighborhood is that the neighborhood was filled with dilapidated houses. So as you can see, this building house is not one of those. Nonetheless, it was torn down. And the person, of course, lost their housing and displace the community. So anyway, it's a great example of, did the public understanding of the housing in the neighborhood, did it match what the appraisals actually said? You know, how much of the neighborhood was actually dilapidated and how much of it was in good condition. So yeah, that's that collection. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or questions. Okay, the next collection I want to highlight is the Democratic Women's Club of Kentucky Journal Collection. This collection has not been digitized, which is why there's no image of it, but it consists of 43 issues of the Democratic Women's Journal. And it was donated by members of the present day Democratic Women's Club of Kentucky in relation to the to what would have been the upcoming 100-year anniversary of their institute, of their organization. Oops. So one of the things about this collection that why I really like it is, well, one, the Democratic Women's Club of Kentucky, it is one of the oldest continuing operating women's political clubs in the country. And it has issues from the, I believe it was the second issue, which I believe was in 1928 until the 1940s. So basically you're getting a sense of, at the very least, Kentucky Democratic women, their political involvement and engagement and their ideology pretty soon after women got the right to vote, which I just think is really interesting how they approached it, what they thought other women wanted to know about being engaged in political life. And then, of course, the Democratic Women's Club had several well-known and very politically and socially engaged women involved in the club, especially Laura Clay and Emma Guy Cromwell. Laura Clay being a well-known suffragist from Kentucky. You know, interestingly enough, Laura Clay has a very interesting legacy in the suffragist movement in Kentucky. A lot of people, of course, know that she was a co-founder of the Equal Rights Association, if I'm not mistaken. But perhaps others don't know that she ultimately didn't support the 19th Amendment and really fell into a different ideological sphere as most of the women suffragists in the United States, which felt the federal amendment was the right call. She was not one of those, which I just find it's an interesting legacy she has, since she is best known for being Kentucky's biggest suffragist. So anyway, then Emma Guy Cromwell, she was the first woman elected to statewide office here in Kentucky. She was first elected. Now this is kind of an interesting election because she was elected as state librarian in 1896, if I'm not mistaken. But that election wasn't a public election. So she was the first elected to a statewide office with that first election in 1896, but then she was actually in 1923 elected, truly elected by the entire state, you know, in a statewide election to be Secretary of State. So in a weird way, she was twice the first woman elected to statewide office, if that makes sense. And she gives in the Democratic Women's Journal, she has like a column, let's say, where she's explaining parliamentary procedure to other women and giving advice to other women on the rules of government, like how things work in the governmental system. Again, since it was kind of early, not that long after the women had gotten the vote, they were trying to bring in women who weren't as familiar with politics. So that collection is interesting. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or comments on it as well.
Yeah, Yeah, I have a question, and you may not know, or you may know. How did they go about distributing the journal?
Through the mail. It was mailed to their members. Is that, you mean, how did the Democratic Women's Club in the past, how they go
Yes,
about mail?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was through
Okay.
the mail, it seems, primarily. All of the issues that we have the address, the label and whatnot still on them. The other way that I believe they distribute them was at meetings, particularly annual meetings. It was a big gathering event. I mean, still is a big event for the members to exchange information, ideas, and stuff like that. So they would have them at the, but I think mail was the primary way that they distributed the journals. Also kind of interesting in these journals, even though it is the Democratic Women's Club of Kentucky journal, they often have guest columnists, and they're almost always men from other states, but that are Democratic politicians, to speak on some issue that they want to get the politician wants to get the message out to the women of, at the very least, Kentucky. It's just an interesting way in which the women's club was kind of used, I think, anyway. So that's that collection. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the different educational programs that we offer at KHS. The first one is our Kentucky Social Studies Resource Guide, which was created as a way to provide easy to use activities for the classroom for teachers that are directly related to Kentucky's standards for social studies. I'm not an educator, so I'm not as familiar with the social studies standards, but our main teacher resource educator here at KHS, Claire Gwaltney, who made this resource guide, did a fantastic job saying what the I've just lost the word, what the standard is, and then how our activity can address that standard and whatnot. It's pretty straightforward. And I use the one for 8th grade, but there is a resource guide for every grade K through 12. And the other thing I should have mentioned about this particular program is that what Claire did was, she came up with all the title, the context, the questions, and then she worked with myself and some other people in the archives to digitize all of the documents that would work best with her project. So it was a really great collaboration between the archives and the education team here at KHS. I don't know if anybody has any questions on this particular program, or not program, but resource guide. I should mention that this resource guide is available on our website. It's in a section for educators, if I'm not mistaken, or to bring KHS to your school, if I'm not mistaken either. That's how you can find it. Or you can contact Claire Gwaltney as well to learn more about this particular program. Next, another program that our learning team does is called Host a Historian. It is for grades 8 through 12. And in this case, it's a little bit different. In basically, there are 4 KHS staff members that participate in this program. There are 2 of them with their descriptions and whatnot on the screen now, but there are 2 additional people who participate in Host a Historian. And it does everything that I think most educators, most teachers would want out of a program like this. I think a lot of us who work in the archives and who work in education know that critical thinking, historical literacy, and visual literacy are probably the three most important skills to learn in order to, get students to interact with the material like a historian might. And this program does it perfectly. So if anybody is interested in that, it is offered on demand, meaning you sign up, go to our website, request that you want to have this service, and then you'll work with the educators to figure out the best day, time that the historian can come to the classroom. Now, of course, this is a virtual experience, so I don't mean physically go to the classroom. Not right now, anyway. Maybe one day. Any thoughts or questions about this program? Is there a cost? Let me double check. I don't believe there is a cost for this program, but I would have to double check on that before I say too much. So those are a couple of our more traditional educational programs. I also wanted to mention a few of our archival outreach efforts. The first one is a scavenger hunt that we've done called Finding Historic Frankfort. The idea is fairly simple. We give people, using images from our archival collection, we give people 10 images, 12 images, I'm not sure how many we use, but a certain amount of images that are historical photographs of present day buildings that exist somewhere around Frankfurt. And what they have to do is figure out, based on it, the way it looked in, the historical photograph, what the current present day building is. So as an example, I don't know if anybody recognizes and can tell us what the image on the screen is. It's a building located here in Frankfurt, actually near the Kentucky Historical Society. So it's the, this is one that this is a bonus image now for our scavenger hunt, because we've realized that a lot of people, while it's familiar to them, they cannot locate it. And I don't blame them. It looks strangely different. Yep, Austin got it right. It's the old governor's house, the old governor's mansion. It's actually right next door to KHS on High Street. And the thing that makes it, I think, the most different is the shutters. I believe that the shutters are gone, and so it really throws people off. But it is, in fact, the old governor's mansion. Anyway, so the scavenger hunt is a really good way to get people who may or may not be familiar with Frankfurt or Frankfurt's history. It's a great way to get them to go out into the community, have a good time with a group. It is a group activity for the most part. The other way we kind of make it fun is that we ask that the teams that are participating in the scavenger hunt, we ask that they go to the present day building, take a picture of everybody in their team with the building in the background, and then post it to Instagram. And we give a prize to the team that has the best Instagram caption. So gives people a way to be fun and clever, but also learn about some history. And we typically have done this in conjunction with our History Happy Hour, which is a program I'll talk about in a second, that we do, or that we have done with in partnership with Buffalo Trace. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Oh, sorry. We typically have done the scavenger hunts in the spring, since it's an outdoor. Sometimes we've gotten caught in the rain, but for the most part, anytime where it's decent temperature outside, good weather, not raining, not snowing, that's when we've been looking to do. But also not too hot, because it could take about an hour, and we do prefer, you know, people to walk. So we try to make all the houses within walking distance of each other. So good weather is important. Don't want it to be too hot and uncomfortable for the participants. So as I mentioned before, we do a program called History Happy Hour with Buffalo Trace. History Happy Hour and Piecing Together History, while they have different names, they're very similar. And the event themselves, they are basically a way for KHS to take a collection out to a community. You know, with Piecing Together History, the idea is that we take, say, a collection of photographs from a church in Winchester. Then we go to Winchester and try to engage the community living in Winchester to either provide stories that they have related to the church, or to see if they can identify any of the unidentified people or places in the photograph collection. A lot of times when we do it, it's actually not about getting the metadata, it's about making the connections with the community and exposing them, getting them to engage with archival material to see value in it, and that kind of thing. With Buffalo Trace, it is specifically Frankfort photographs that we share at that event. And even further, Buffalo Trace shares their own photographs, and they're trying to, again, get their community, people who have been active or engaged with Buffalo Trace, to see if they can identify people, places, events, that kind of thing, from using photographs from their collections. And both the Piecing Together History and History Happy Hour are free events, and I'm hopeful that we will do both somewhat soon. I don't know if there are any questions or comments on this one. Okay, and then so I believe, do you ever collaborate with local archives? Thus far, I'm trying to think, for the Piecing Together Histories, I don't think we work with local archives. But for the History Happy Hour, in a weird way, Buffalo Trace was the local archives that we collaborated with. In addition to that, we have we have offered to work with other local archives, and I think it would be, I'm hopeful that in the future we will collaborate more with either local archives or local historical societies in general, just a way to get the community engaged in what we do, the material we have, and that kind of thing. So yes, I believe this is the last one for the outreach efforts. A few years, over the course of a couple of years rather, I've had this kind of working relationship with a professor at Kentucky State University. She's actually a sociology professor, but she often talks about, studies the Crawfish Bottom neighborhood. So in relation to that, she has brought 2 of her classes to KHS to look at we have 2 collections that really highlight the Crawfish Bottom area neighborhood over, maybe 100 years. And so she's brought her class to explore the ways in which the community, the Craw community, has been talked about, has been depicted, and then also to look at that graphic 9 collection, where it was the appraisals of the Crawfish Bottom neighborhood before it was torn down. A couple of things to highlight about this experience, at least for me, is that the photograph on the left is a photograph from 1912, when there was a Frankfort Betterment, I can't remember the exact name, but the Frankfort Betterment organization that was pushing to, for lack of a better term, clean up the Crawfish Bottom neighborhood. And one of the ways that they did that was that they got a local photographer to go around the neighborhood and take photographs of the neighborhood to show its condition. And in one way, it's really interesting that because the fact that they used a local photographer to do this is the only reason why we have these photographs of the Crawfish Bottom neighborhood in the early 1900s. Otherwise, if they had just done it themselves, taking the photographs, we probably wouldn't have them. So anyway, I think it's a great idea, a great use of this photograph compared to the Graphic 9 collection, where you can compare how the neighborhood has changed over about not quite 100 years, over about 50, 60 years. Now, obviously, you can see the photograph that is on the left and the one that is in the top right shows very different conditions. Given about the half century that the difference between these two photographs, I think, it's reasonable to expect that there's no longer mud roads in a residential neighborhood in the 1950s, which is the upper right-hand corner photograph, is from the 1950s, 60s time period. In any case, all of these photographs and all of these collections, or all of those collections rather, have helped the students get a better understanding of what the neighborhood was like from various perspectives. On the left side, you have this perspective. Of course, it's a lot, it's earlier in the 20th century, but you have the perspective of a group of community activists wanting to improve the neighborhood, both improve the housing situation, but also the infrastructure, the roads, the sewage, that kind of thing. So that's one of the perspectives. Then you have the perspective from the urban renewal movement, where they're looking at the condition of the buildings, giving their appraisals, and providing a look at what the neighborhood looked like right before it was torn down. And then at the bottom right, you have a photograph that was donated as a part of a community collecting event we did in the 90s called Community Memories. There's also a book called Community Memories. And this photograph is from a barbershop that was located in the Craw neighborhood. So you're getting a sense of what the people living in the neighborhood, how they felt about their neighborhood. They felt it was a community. The barbershop, there's young, there's old, all different walks of life was living in the neighborhood, kind of thing. Then you get from somebody from the outside who's saying, actually, this neighborhood isn't quite as great as the people living in it want it, and we can build something better than what neighborhood is there. And then on the far left, again, the idea that we need to show people what the neighborhood looks like and what needs to be better about it. That it is a neighborhood where there are people, there are local, that there are working class folks living in these housings that's unacceptable for the population, kind of a thing. They're just really interesting collections that have been used in a really interesting way by this sociology professor in class at KSU, which I really enjoyed actually learning stuff from them in the sociology way. So that is that collection. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or questions about this collection, or this outreach program. All right. So that is it for me today. Unless anybody has some questions, I'd be happy to answer all questions that you have.
Yay, thank you so much. While we wait for anyone to jump in with any questions that they have, I just want to again say thank you to Deana Thomas for this presentation. There's a lot of, even though you all are basically neighbors to us, we're in the same town, there's a lot I didn't know about KHS's outreach efforts or the collections that you have. That's a real good variety and a really good representation of Kentucky. So thank you again. As a reminder, this will this has been recorded and will be available on YouTube later. So if you know anyone who might be interested in viewing it, please feel free to share. And happy Archives Month to everybody. We just want to make sure that, archives are recognized, archivists are recognized for all the work they do and all the effort that they put in making the connections to the past and the present. So yeah, thank you and happy archives, everyone. I'm not seeing any questions, but we'll give it a few more minutes. But thank you everybody who attended, greatly appreciated. And we certainly hope to see you at our next scheduled event, which is the 25th. And we will have the Berea College Special Collections and Archives presenting then. So if you have any questions about that one, please let me know, and I will send you the registration link. So yeah,